Welcome back to the Unstuck movement. I am your host, Rob Z. This platform was created to help you break those chains in your life that have been holding you back personally and professionally. And today, we're going to be talking about things like confidence, overcoming odds, accountability that we need to have in our lives, boundaries, and being bold. And we're talking with the very powerful, the incredible Stephanie Martino. And Stephanie, so great to have you here. I love to jump in with a question right off the bat, just to get right into the heart of the matter, right? So whenever I bring people on, I ask them some of their favorite quotes. And the quote that you gave me is one that I absolutely love. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And if we can look at life in a way that life is happening for us, it kind of changes everything for us. What does that quote mean to you? How does it apply to your Unstuck story?
It's a foundation, I would say. When you think about life is happening, right? There are things that just are happening in our lives. Sometimes we don't have any control over it, but whether we think it's happening for us or to us is determined based on the perspective that we choose, right? I always was interested in how the same thing could happen to two people, and those two people would respond completely differently to it. Life happened, but for one, they chose to see it as something they could learn from, something they could grow from. And so life happened for them, versus someone else may have felt like, more of like a victim to it. And, oh, poor me, life never goes my way, and let it just kind of beat them down. And in that situation, it would be a perspective of life is happening to me. So really, it's all about making that intentional choice to say, I am going to look at this situation, as crappy as it may be, to see what I can learn from it, how I can grow from it, so that I can become a better person. So that quote, I think it was maybe coined by Tony Robbins originally, but I think it is just foundational to mindset in general. That is the foundation of mindset.
Absolutely. And, it's really interesting when you said, life is just happening. It's neither objectively, it's neither good or bad. Life is just happening. We assign meaning to life, right? And it's really interesting how that is. It's really, I had a really hard time when I was younger wrapping my head around this. So life is just happening, which means bad things could be happening, but I have to assign bad to those things, and life could be happening and I can assign good to those things. And you're able to do both. It doesn't seem like you are, because our reactions, our emotions happen so quickly, but we are able to do that. So I absolutely love that. We're going to dive more into that and what that means to you in your life. But I want to welcome people here first, because the Unstuck movement, I created this platform to bring amazing guests on who've had true testimonies of real breakthrough in their lives, to prove to you, the listener, that it's possible for you. No matter what you're going through, breakthrough is possible. It's inevitable if you keep going, you keep pushing through it, and you have faith, right? So it's so important to know that no matter where you're at in life, you're able to get through that thing. So these stories are examples for you. We're sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com. And, if you're somebody who wants to launch a platform, maybe you're the expert at what you do, you want to be the go-to authority in your industry, you want to make incredible connections personally and professionally, and you want to leave a lasting impact on people's lives, I encourage you to launch your own podcast, and I'd love to help you do that. If you want to do that, go to robzwentz.com, join the wait list for our Pro Podcaster Academy. Today, Stephanie Martino is in the house. She's a speaker and mindset coach who empowers women to shift from fear and self-doubt to bold, faith-driven action. After 27 years in corporate America, she now helps women step into their God-given purpose through coaching, speaking, and community leadership. But I want to let everybody know today, this isn't just for women today. It's for men and women, because we all can benefit from these things. And I want to go into, Stephanie, just that life is happening to you, for you. What was happening where life was happening to you? And what did that mindset shift do for you?
So I think, as long as I can remember, I have tried to look for what I can learn out of life. Part of that may have been from wanting to be like other people growing up. So it may have not started off in a very positive way, right? But like, oh, how can I be more like them? How can I be more outgoing, right? But I think that idea of trying to see what was going on around me. What can I learn from this? How can I use that to make me a better person. So I think for just a large portion of my life, I've kind of had that idea. When it comes to using it for good, right? Not as in comparing myself, that has been, I think, just a journey. One of the pivotal moments, though, in my life that has stuck with me and I think has been really a catalyst to help me continue with that mindset is when I was first married. I originally got married when I was 19. And within the first few years, of course, we decided, well, we're going to have a kid. It's time, to start a family. And so that's what we were going to do. Our friends were all getting pregnant. It was a happy time. And I struggled to get pregnant. And at that time, you didn't really hear as much about infertility. People didn't talk about it. It wasn't as well known. The only thing people knew about infertility was if someone had twins or triplets, then they're like, oh, they must have gone to fertility treatments. That is as much as people knew. So for me, I didn't know enough about it. And I just assumed, well, we'll go to the doctor. They'll do whatever. They'll make it happen. I'm going to get pregnant. No problem. That never happened. And so it was for me a very long journey of fighting this. Why is this happening to me? I was always good with kids. I always assumed I would be a mom, right? Why was this happening to me? God, why aren't you allowing me to have a child? What did I do wrong? Right. Mm-hmm. And so this was a thought process that I had for several years. And it was so hard. And there's a lot more to that story. That'd be a whole nother episode. So we won't go into all that detail. But throughout that process, I finally got to the point where I could say to God, if this isn't your will for me, for whatever reason, if it's not your will for me to have a child, then you must have a good reason. Please help me to accept it. Right? I don't want to fight this. I don't want to have this horrible, depressing, heavy weight on me the rest of my life, feeling like my life is now can't go on because I'm not a mom. And so when I was able to start shifting my thoughts and my prayers that way, it just turned me. And I was able then to see a different future for my life, because up to that point, the only future I could even imagine for myself is that, I was going to get married. I was going to have kids. I was going to have a family. This is just what you did. And so when I finally accepted that, all right, this is just for whatever reason, I'm maybe not going to have children. Now what can life look like? And I have loved my life, right? Life, God has provided so many opportunities for me to be able to do things. And if I'd had children, I wouldn't have been able to do those things. I don't know. And I'm also able now to use that experience to speak into other women who are going through a similar situation, right? That there is hope beyond what we hoped for. I had hoped for this life that I had imagined. And when that didn't happen, there's hope beyond that. And I was able to then see that. So I had to shift my thinking from life's happening to me. Why is this happening to me? To, okay, how can I grow from this? How can I shift towards something else? And I'm so thankful for that.
I love that. And I think it's important to also mention whenever you say this statement, it might take a couple of years to go from the to me to for me, right? It's not like I'm going to look at this differently right now. No, it's like, well, that might take 5-10 years for you to look at it differently. And everybody's journey is different, but at the same time, there's a lesson to be learned there. And I think that's the important part here, right? Is like, and that's the point of this podcast, is there's a mess and there's a message that comes from it. And we all have our own individual messes, and they might look different in different situations. But when we get through them, that creates something we can help other people with. And that's what you do. You help women through that process because you've gone through it. Like, you can speak directly to it. And it's interesting you said, so whenever this first happened, not many people were talking about infertility. It's incredible to know like how much the world has changed in a short span of time, that now it's a very common thing to talk about it and to bring it up and to be open about it. Yeah. And I think it just kind of speaks to where we're at, like in our culture, because everybody acts like, things are worse than they used to be somehow. But in situations like you're talking about right now, like we're much more open and communicative than we used to be. now we lack communication in other ways, but it's amazing that we're able to like talk about those things now. And I just love that. And also something else that I wanted to bring up, because I know that you went from a corporate background in corporate America into entrepreneurship, and the fear that came from that, right? You talk about fear is often the doorway to purpose. And I think this kind of goes into this, the pregnancy story too. The fear of like, why is this happening to me, leads into that purpose. How did that also show up in your professional life too?
Yeah. I think that idea of, fear leading into purpose, fear, it's like the fear of the unknown, because we don't know. So even when you think about in my infertility journey, like I didn't know what life would look like, if I didn't have children. I mean, you don't even know what it's going to look like if you do, right? But when I left my corporate job, or was considering leaving, it was scary, because what was I going to do? I grew up that you have a job. You have a responsible job with a paycheck, with insurance, you save money, like very responsible. And those are good things. But the idea of not having a job was very scary to me. In fact, for years, I was like, absolutely no way would I ever be an entrepreneur, ever have my own business, not even a consideration, right? Well, we see what God does. So when I was in corporate, I had a good job. I worked for a good company, worked with great people, but I just always felt that there was something more I was meant to do, something different. Like I really had this desire to help people, but I didn't know what. There's a million ways you can help people. And so I was on this long multi-year journey of searching and praying and doing all the career assessments and personality assessments that you could do, trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with my life? And through a series of events that, looking back, you can see how God planted people and situations in my life. He led me on a path that didn't feel like I was taking a risk. He brought someone into my life that shared an idea that I loved about hope, right? About being this warrior of hope for people. And we just started talking about it. And I was like, oh, this is great. Let's share this. Let's do, let's have a Facebook group. Let's do an event. We did all these things. That led into, well, maybe this should be a business, right? This could be a business. So God knows us. He knew I was not going to just up and leave my corporate job to start a business. So I appreciate that he works with us as to who we are. And he led me gently into this. And so when we started this business, then my company was going through a major reorganization. And I had been at that company for 21 years. And a lot of people were going to be losing their jobs. There was an opportunity for people to volunteer to leave with a pretty nice severance package. And I'm like, this is my opportunity. I will never have this perfect opportunity again. And so again, God provided this way for me to leave my job with this severance package, so I didn't have to immediately worry about how am I going to make money. And so just through these series of events, he led me to this. And that other business with my friend, we ended up shutting that down. Her husband got transferred out of state, and it just felt like the right time. But that's what led me to having my own business now. So I would not be here today if God hadn't orchestrated those things in my life, because I would have never chosen it myself. However, I still had to make that decision to leave my job, to move forward. And so there still is fear. There was, and there still is fear about, okay, well, what is this going to look like? Is this going to be successful? Am I going to be able to do this? Will people trust me? Will they think I can do it? There's all these questions that come up in my mind and come up, I'm sure, a lot of entrepreneurs' minds of, can I really do this? And I found that when I choose faith over fear and trust that if God put me on this path, then he is going to work things out. I don't know exactly where this path is going to lead. A year from now, 5 years from now, who knows what it's going to look like. but I'm trusting that God is going to lead me. But that takes a very scary step of faith
Mhm.
over and over again. And that's where that boldness, that courage comes into play. But my faith, I thank God, my faith has grown so much through this scary time. My faith has grown immensely because I have stepped into fear, which is crazy, but it makes perfect sense.
Well, doesn't it make sense? Because, the enemy is where fear comes from, right? That's the fear. So God wants us to face the fear. If we kowtow to the fear, we're just giving in to the devil. We're just
Yeah.
like we're giving in to like, okay, I don't I'm not capable of doing this. And also it's saying God's not able to do this for me too, right? We kind of let that concept control us. We're going to be bound because God, I love going back to this idea, but God created life to be an adventure. And
Mhm.
oftentimes when we're in our corporate job or our safe, comfortable little job that might not be fulfilling, but it's comfortable, there's not a whole lot of adventure. And we don't have to step out nearly as much and rely on God whenever we're in those situations. Now, you still can if you desire to inside of a corporate structure, but whenever you step out as an entrepreneur, and this is, I mean, God's a creator. What is his character? One of his most defining characteristics is he creates things, right? And we were made in his image, so we're meant to create things. So if we're not creating, we're not being like God. We're not being who he designed us to be. And so I love that. And I actually, this past Sunday at church, I got a word that was, you can feel the push and pull of fear and of spirit, right? So you can feel that when you're supposed to step out and do something, you feel this push of like, oh, that's scary. I'm not going to do that, right?
Mhm.
But if you lean into Holy Spirit, you feel this pull on your life. You're pulled into doing things, but you got to step out in the face of that fear and go for it. So I love that because that is the place, that uncomfortable comfort zone.
Yes.
Why do you think so many people stay in that? Because I love talking about this
Mhm.
because I'm there too, right? I stepped into the face of fear and I can't believe where my life is now. But the fear always continues to come up because there's always more that God's calling you to do, right? So, what do you say to people who are stuck in that uncomfortable comfort zone, but they don't want to move?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I love that term, uncomfortable comfort zone, because it's a comfort zone because it's familiar. We know what to expect, but it can really be uncomfortable. It can feel very unfulfilling. I guess it's the good word. And what I try to focus on with people is, again, helping them start shifting their perspective, right? All right, how is life happening for me? How can I look at this differently? But then finding out, really digging in to figure out, well, what is my purpose? To take a phrase from Ed Milet, he says, you were created for more. Everyone is created to do more, right? To do something great with their life. And I believe that. I think
Mhm.
we get hung up on the word great. It doesn't have to be you're starting an orphanage or you're going on missionary trips or you are donating millions of dollars. That's great. But it's also great to show up in those daily small moments and make impact on people's lives. And when we are able to do that, that's when we start to feel fulfilled
Mhm.
and we are doing something meaningful. When we know what our purpose is, which is really comes down to what are our values? What do we truly value? Knowing that and being able to describe it, not just saying it's a word, right? But what does that look like? What does that mean to me? What are my strengths? What did God create me naturally to be able to do well? And what are my passions? What do I love doing? What fires me up? God, again, put that in our lives. And then what are our life experiences? What are the things that we've been through that has given us a unique perspective where now we know what it's like to do this or to go through this, right? Just like with my infertility journey. I know what it's like to go through that. I don't have to guess. And everybody has these unique experiences. And
Mhm.
I believe God wants us, He doesn't want to waste that, right? He wants us to be able to use these things that have been in our lives, how life has happened to us, to then be able to do something good with it. And when we do that, not only are we being more fulfilled, personally, we feel good about it, but it also gives us the confidence and the courage to do the hard thing. Because when, like you said, when we are in just a job, if it's something we're just doing it, right? I just need this job. Are we feeling fulfilled at the end of the day?
Mhm.
Do we feel filled up? Like, yes, man, that just makes me feel alive. Or do we feel drained when we get home? It might be a
Yeah.
mix of both. But when we are living our purpose, what God created us to do, to be able to glorify Him, that's when we have that fulfillment, and it gives us that courage and that confidence to move past the fear, to keep stepping forward in faith, because it is this strong drive inside. It's
Mhm.
not an external thing. It's something that God has put in our lives, and He wants to bless. And that feels amazing. But we have to move past the fear in order to be able to do that.
Very true. I was just reading last night, John Maxwell, his latest book, High Road Leadership. And in the book, it was a really good statement. I can't say it exactly how he wrote it, but the idea is whenever you become really aligned with your purpose, the fear kind of goes by the wayside. Fear
Mhm.
shows up when you're not, the more you get aligned with your purpose of what you're supposed to be doing. And that's such a cliche thing to say, right? Because
Mhm.
people talk about purpose all the time.
Right.
And we could go deeper into like, what does it mean to have a purpose? And I believe, and I know you believe too, if your purpose is not aligned with what God's purpose is for your life, it's not gonna be in alignment, and it's not gonna
Mhm.
feel the way it's supposed to feel. So if we have that knowingness of that purpose, then the fear just goes away, because it's like, well, no longer do I need to do this to make money. I have to do this to help people because I know I'm
Mhm.
supposed to help people in this way, right? And I think that's when you talk about happening to you or for you, and it's like that mindset shift of like, no longer am I wondering if this is the right thing to do. I know it's the right thing. And when you know it's the right thing, now you have to do it
Yeah.
because you're called to do it. And that's
Yeah.
a whole different world. So we're going to take a quick pause here to shout out the sponsor of the show. When we come back, though, I want to talk about confidence in that area, right? Because that's so important, because a lot of us struggle with confidence.
Mhm.
And when we talk about confidence, how does accountability play in to building your
Mhm.
confidence? And how did you build your confidence, right? From somebody who never thought they could do this to stepping out and doing what you're doing now. How did that confidence build over time? And how can we help people do that? We'll talk about that in 1 minute. Are you struggling to make consistent, valuable content for yourself? Do you want to have an efficient and effective way to create content that attracts the people that you want to connect with in life, the people you want to build relationships with in business? Do you want to be the go-to authority at what you do, at what you're great at? Would it be helpful for you if you had a platform that connects you to incredible people in your industry? The kind of platform that gets you leads and lands you clients without you having to beat down anybody's door or blow up anybody's inbox. Whether you're already creating content or you're desiring to start and it's something that's been kind of burning inside of you for a while, I urge you and encourage you to check out the Pro Podcaster Academy. Get started right now. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world globally. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, join the Connected Leaders Academy today. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JASCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
Stephanie, I'm loving this conversation, and it's so important to have this conversation because we all need to hear these stories to step out in boldness, in faith. And when you talk about building confidence, what role did accountability play in you building your confidence? And how did that confidence grow over time to get you to where you are now?
Well, I think first of all, I want to talk about different types of confidence. When I left my job and started my own business, I quickly lost confidence. um, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I can't do this. Oh, it was horrible. And what I realized is that in my job, I mean, I was, most of us are, we are good at our jobs. And I would get that external validation, right? Good performance reviews, um, attaboys, like, hey, great job, get opportunities that recognized the work that I was doing. So I felt I had confidence. But what I realized after I left is that confidence was actually not coming from inside me. It was this validation that I was getting from outside me. And so when I didn't have that anymore, oh, that was hard. And I went through a real little, I don't know, mini breakdown, I guess, because I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And now what I'm finding is that my confidence, it's not even so much about me. It's not even confidence in me. It's confidence in knowing that God has a purpose for me. And if I will be courageous and walk forward and do that, I'm confident that it's going to work because he's going to bless it. So it's not even like self-confidence per se. I mean, there is a piece of that, but I think that can sometimes cause a little too much pride. And I think we all probably struggle with that more than we want to admit. That's something I know I've realized about myself. Like, oh my gosh, Stephanie, like, this is just pride showing up. We need to get rid of this. And so the type of confidence has changed. So that's kind of first thing.
I always call it Godfidence, by the way. That sort of confidence.
Yes. So yes, I've heard that as well. And I think that is such a great phrase to describe that. The piece about accountability, when we are able to own up to our mistakes, our bad decisions, our pride, or whatever, when we actually own that and say, you know what, yep, that was a bad decision. Yeah, I didn't show up well there. Look, I'm learning from it. I'm not going to beat myself down, right? I'm going to learn from it. But when I own it, it actually builds my confidence. Because if I truly made a bad decision, and this is personal experience, I have made some straight out bad decisions in my life that I can look back on. Yeah, right. We don't want to talk about it, but I own it. Now, if I call those bad decisions mistakes, oh, I made a mistake. To me, that is me letting myself off the hook, because truly a mistake in my mind is an oops, I didn't realize that was going to happen, right? I tripped, right? I didn't mean to do it. But when I make a bad decision, that's not a mistake in my mind. And so when I own it and say, yeah, I made a bad decision, it actually builds my confidence because I am taking accountability for my actions. I'm not being like, oh, I made a mistake. That just, I think, weakens our confidence and our ability to show up as who we are in a way that's full of integrity.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you said about stepping out into entrepreneurship, because when you're at a job for a long time, you're good at your job, right? You're good at the thing that you're assigned to do. And like you said, you get praise from the outside. Some jobs don't give you any praise, but luckily you had one that did. But also on top of that, you have a company that's taking care of all the other stuff. So all you got to do is your thing. When you step out into entrepreneurship, there's nobody doing your thing for you. No, there's all these things that you never had to do before that now you got to do. And I think I'll go back to this. This is why God calls us to create. And whether we are a full-blown entrepreneur or we have something on the side where we create, where we serve people, and whatever way our gifting is set in, that is stepping out in full faith, because you're kind of out there without a net. Like, I got to figure this thing out because nobody's going to build this for me. I can listen to a bunch of other people and I can get advice, but it's going to be my journey. And if I'm not linked up with God on that, it's not going to go the way that it's supposed to go. And there is so much value in the personal development that comes along with starting your own business. And this doesn't get talked about enough. Your faith will be built so much by starting your own business, right? And so I'm curious for you in that area. I know how much I've grown since I'm about 8 years into leaving my full-time job and having my own business. And the 8 years since I've done that, I've grown more in that time than I did my previous rest of my life. There's been so much growth. How has that been for you? Talk about that experience for you.
Same. And I will say the biggest growth in me has been in my faith. I've been a Christian my entire life, but something that just kind of hit me actually just this morning when I was reading in one of the devotionals was that I think I was just kind of like a sideline Christian. Like I was part of the team, but I wasn't in the game. I was like, yep, I'm part of the team, got the uniform, I'm, trying to do things right, be a good Christian. But as far as actually living more intentionally and with purpose, like taking steps of faith, taking risks, I wasn't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And being an entrepreneur requires that you take risks. And I was always a risk averse person. I think that's part of the reason I didn't want to have my own business, because that means, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my money and I'm going to be living in a van down by the river. If you remember Tony Boy, Saturday Night Live. But being an entrepreneur requires taking risks, which requires stepping out in faith. And so that has built my faith confidence, I guess you could say, because now I feel like I'm in the game. I'm no longer on the sidelines, just part of the team. I'm actually playing. I am catching the ball. Right? Sometimes I don't want to catch the ball.
Yeah.
But I know when I do, God is going to go with me. He's going to show me how to get past or through obstacles, right? And sometimes I may have to, he wants me to pass the ball to somebody else because maybe I've done my part and now it's somebody else's part. But that just hit me this morning. And that has all developed since I have been in business for myself. And I think because, like you said, we don't have that safety net of other people that we can lean on to handle things for us. Like it's all us. Like I am a business of one person. So I'm doing it all. So the faith journey definitely has grown. As far as just personal development as well, absolutely. Because I have to go, I Google so many things. I look on YouTube, how do you do this? I admit the two things I miss the most about working in corporate is tech support and the benefits. Those are the big things. So I've had to figure out a lot of things on my own, but that's not a bad thing. I don't enjoy it. I didn't go into business for the business side. I went into business to help people. But that's part of it. And it has grown me. I think that creates more perseverance, resilience, just on that journey.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to learn a bunch of things that you wouldn't learn otherwise. You wouldn't have to spend the time to learn otherwise. And as your business grows too, the delegation part of it too, that's a whole nother arm of this is like, okay, now that I've learned how to somewhat do this for myself, I got to hand it off to somebody and I got to trust that they know what they're doing. Right. So there's so much, it pulls on you personally so much, which is why your faith is built and stronger, at least in my experience and in yours. I know that. I want to shift gears real fast though, because I want to talk about boundaries, because that's something that is really hard for a lot of people. It was really hard for me. And I don't think I'm great at it now, but I'm much better at it than I used to be. How can setting boundaries change your life? How has setting boundaries changed your life?
Yeah, boundaries. Nobody likes to talk about boundaries. And I haven't run into too many people that are really good at it. It's something I think we all struggle with, because I think the word that comes to mind is conflict. Like, oh, there's going to be some conflict, right? And one of the big things and a misconception about boundaries is that I think a lot of times we may be like, I'm putting this boundary in place to change their behavior. When in reality, boundaries are all about my behavior, right? I have to know, first of all, what my boundaries are. To me, a lot of that goes back to understanding what your values are, right? What's important to you? Do you really know yourself as a person? And that can help define where your boundaries should be. And when you truly know your values and why it's important to you, it helps you to be able to set that boundary a little bit easier. But then there's communication. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be rude. It's just about like, hey, this is where I'm at. And if that person crosses that boundary, then I have to reestablish it. It may take a lot of repeating, but it's really us demonstrating in how we live and how we show up. That's what keeps the boundary. And again, to me, a lot of that just comes down to living in alignment with your values. That helps me I will say for myself, that helps me to continue to show up in a way where even when it's hard to hold that boundary, I know if I don't, that I'm not living in alignment with who I am and who God has called me to be. What's more important? Being in alignment with what God wants or making the other person feel comfortable? Yeah. So I think that
and I think on
I
top of that too, it's more, at least for me thinking, oh, I don't want this person to be uncomfortable. It's actually, I don't want to be uncomfortable with them being uncomfortable. All right. So I'm actually working through that right for myself. I have goals on my screen I can look at right now. One of my goals is being okay with people not being okay with me. Right. And one of the reasons I wouldn't set boundaries is because I personally couldn't handle somebody being upset with me. Like, it was not that they're upset. It's that I am affected by them being upset. Right. How it goes back to the beginning, how I'm reacting to life, and I would react to it in this fearful, I can't handle this sort of way.
yeah. And I think a lot of times Christians struggle with this in particular because, and again, I'll speak for myself, right? You're supposed to be nice. You're supposed to be kind to everyone, right? And so setting a boundary sometimes doesn't feel kind. I shouldn't make them uncomfortable. I should do things for them, make them comfortable. And there is a piece of that definitely applies. But when it starts stepping on what God wants for my life, that is not what God wants, right? He wants me to hold that boundary. I am nowhere an expert on setting boundaries myself. That is something, again, that I think it's a journey. I'm definitely a lot further along in my own journey than I was. Again, leaving corporate, doing this on my own, having to figure things out on my own, understanding what my purpose is. And if I'm going to live my purpose, I've got to set boundaries. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'm going to go off in other directions and I'm not going to stay aligned with what God has asked me to do. So boundaries, again, knowing your purpose helps define those boundaries, and it helps you live in a way that maintains those boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And it needs to be talked about too. I mean, yeah, I'm not by far the best at it, but it has to be talked about because it has to be brought to the surface and you have to be aware of it. And you mentioned about how, like, as Christians, we're supposed to be nice to everybody. And we have this, like, this mindset, but you look at Jesus, I mean, he was challenging people constantly. He was drawing boundaries constantly. I mean, he came to separate son from father and mother from daughter. Like, he came to, like, with a sword to separate people, and it's a challenge. Those are boundaries.
Yeah.
And they're there for a reason, right? And I think that's what you said. When you align with your purpose, the boundaries are easier because there's a reason for the boundaries. It's not just like, oh, I just want to do this because of some frivolous reason. It's like, no, there's reasons why these need to be in place. And a lot of us go through our life never even talking about this. We never even address it, and we let it happen to us. Let life happen to us for our entire life. So very important to touch on. As we come to the close of this episode, I want to talk about what you do, right? So, and how you impact women's lives. So I want to invite people who are watching right now. You can go to your website, Charting Your Path to Fulfillment. You have a course for people. So Stephanie Martin Coaching. Do I have Martino? All right. Stephanie Martino Coaching.com. Hold on. Stop for a second. I'm going to say it again. Stephanie Martino Coaching.myflowdesk.com/next chapter. So the link will be in the show notes. If you're watching, you can get that link right there. What can they expect from that?
Mm-hmm. So this is just a free resource that I have, and it really helps people go through that self-reflection process of identifying what are their values and really thinking about it. One of the things that I help my clients with is don't just tell me a word. Don't just say, oh, yes, that's important to me. I challenge them and I say, well, why? Why is it important to you? What does it feel like when you don't live in alignment with that value? And when we can explain and understand truly why that value is important to us, that's when it becomes something we can really own. So this is part of it. Go deeper. So the values, strengths, what are you naturally good at? What skills have you developed? So it'll take you through that process. What are you passionate about? And then those life experiences. So this little workbook is something to just help people think through that and see what stands out to them, what themes come out of this. Because when we start going through that process, things start popping out, and it's like, oh, okay, like I'm seeing a little theme here, and that can start leading someone to possibly where they could be living their purpose more intentionally. So that's what that workbook is, and all of that, and as well as various other resources, can be found on my website, stephaniemartinocoaching.com. But some of the other things that I offer, I do have a group coaching program. It's called Get Unstuck and Live Your Purpose. And it's a 14-week virtual program. It goes in depth to understanding what it is that's holding you back. What are those limiting beliefs that you've developed over time? Where did they come from? And then you find a way to challenge that yourself. Because I always say, I can challenge your limiting belief for you, but you're going to be like, well, what does she know? She doesn't know me. Right? You have to do it yourself. And so there's a process for that. It goes through identifying what your purpose is, how can you live more intentionally, and building up that self-confidence, getting rid of the victim mindset, the self-sabotage. So it's a really in-depth program. And then I also have a women's virtual community called Rooted. And we meet twice a month on Zoom. And it's an opportunity for women to come together and just think more and talk more about how are they rooting themselves in Christ. Because as we've discussed, life is happening. We are going to go through hard things. And if we are not rooted in God's word and being able to develop that faith and that trust, then those hard times are much harder. So this is an opportunity for women to come through. It's a faith-filled space for women to grow and thrive together and build that community. So that's called Rooted. And then I do other workshops. I'm actually getting ready to hold a workshop on Sunday called Release and Receive. I'm going to be offering that more in the future. So if you're interested in that, again, go to my website, sign up for my email newsletter, and you will be notified of any of these. So one of my passions has always been to speak in front of crowds, again, to be able to make this positive impact on people. And so opportunities to speak at organizations, conferences, businesses, whatever it may be, where I can bring some of the insight and experiences that I've had to be able to help others. I look for any opportunity to do that as well.
I love it. So awesome. Thank you for doing what you do. Really, really cool. The journey is so important, and helping people along. Like you said, anybody who's going to go through this journey, it's going to be their own decision. They have to do it, right? But that doesn't mean there's not help along the way. That doesn't mean there's not guidance and examples and mentors and an opportunity to model after somebody who's had a breakthrough. And so I just encourage anybody who's going through the process, like if you're going through the learning part, take action, right? If you're going through consuming knowledge, that's the great beginning, but there's a part where you need to take action for yourself. And it sounds like that's what you do with your platform. So make sure you talk with Stephanie, talk more about that, stephaniemartinocoaching.com. Really cool. Also, just a reminder, if you want to launch your own platform and you want to become the authority in your space, I'd love to help you with that. You can join our waitlist for the Pro Podcaster Academy at robzwentz.com. This has been a wonderful conversation, Stephanie. Glad I got introduced to you. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
I would just say, give yourself some grace and do some reflection on how God has made you uniquely you, and how you can use that to then be a light and an impact to others. Every single person has a purpose. So it's just a matter of you reflecting on what that is for yourself. And I would love to support anyone that would like support with that. And thank you so much, Rob, for having me on this podcast. I have really enjoyed this discussion. So I appreciate all of your insights and sharing as well.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on. It was an honor and a privilege to get to meet you, and also just to hear about your ministry of how you're helping people and helping them grow, helping them find those breakthroughs, because that's what we need in life. We need true testimonies of breakthrough to know that it's possible for us. That's what we're all about here on this platform. Until next time, this has been the Unstuck Movement.